Patricia Long woke up at exactly 6 o'clock in the morning, just as she had done every weekday for the past 15 years. The soft golden light of dawn filtered through the lace curtains of her small bedroom, casting delicate patterns on the pale blue walls. She sat up slowly, feeling the familiar stiffness in her back that came with age, and reached for her glasses on the nightstand. The house was quiet. It was always quiet in the mornings in Lake Bend, a small town nestled in the gentle hills of northern Pennsylvania. Patricia lived alone in a modest two-story house on Maple Street, a quiet residential road lined with oak trees that turned brilliant shades of red and gold every autumn. Her house was painted a cheerful yellow with white trim, and she kept a small but well-tended garden in the front yard, where she grew roses, daisies, and lavender. After washing her face and brushing her silver hair into a neat bun, Patricia made her way downstairs to the kitchen. The wooden stairs creaked slightly under her feet, a comforting sound that made the house feel lived in and warm. In the kitchen, she prepared her usual breakfast: oatmeal with sliced bananas and a drizzle of honey, accompanied by a cup of chamomile tea. She ate slowly, savoring each bite while looking out the window at the birds that gathered at the feeder she had hung from the old apple tree in her backyard. Robins, sparrows, and sometimes even a bright red cardinal visited her garden. Patricia had always loved watching birds. There was something peaceful about their simple existence, their uncomplicated lives. They woke up, they sang, they searched for food, they nested, and they rested. No complicated pasts, no regrets, no sleepless nights wondering if they had made the right decisions. At 7:15, Patricia washed her dishes, dried them carefully, and placed them back in the cupboard. She went upstairs to dress for work. She chose a comfortable navy blue cardigan over a cream-colored blouse and a modest gray skirt that fell just below her knees. Patricia always dressed professionally but comfortably. As the secretary at Lake Bend High School, she wanted to look respectable and approachable at the same time. Before leaving the house, she checked her reflection in the hallway mirror. A woman of 67 looked back at her with kind hazel eyes and soft wrinkles that spoke of both smiles and sorrows. Her face was gentle, her expression calm. To anyone who knew her in Lake Bend, Patricia Long was simply a pleasant, helpful woman who had lived quietly in their town for many years. No one in Lake Bend knew who Patricia Long had really been. No one knew that for 25 years, she had worked for the Federal Bureau of Investigation as one of the country's leading forensic handwriting analysts. No one knew that she had helped solve hundreds of cases, identifying criminals through the unique characteristics of their handwriting, their signatures, their threatening letters, their forged documents. No one knew that she had testified in federal courts, that her analyses had sent dangerous people to prison, that her work had saved lives. And no one knew about the mistake that had ended it all. Patricia locked her front door and walked down the path to her car, a reliable old Honda that she had driven for more than a decade. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine trees and freshly cut grass. She waved to her neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, who was watering her flower boxes on her front porch. "Good morning, Patricia," Mrs. Henderson called out cheerfully. "Good morning, Eleanor. Beautiful day, isn't it?" Patricia replied with a warm smile. "Absolutely lovely. Will I see you at the community center tonight? We're having the quilting circle." "I'll be there," Patricia promised. This was her life now. Simple conversations about beautiful days and quilting circles. A far cry from federal investigations and criminal profiles, but it was a life she had chosen. A life where she could do no harm. A life where her mistakes could not destroy an innocent person. Patricia drove the short distance to Lake Bend High School, a brick building that sat on a hill overlooking the town. The school had been built in the 1950s and had that classic American high school look, with wide hallways, tall windows, and a flagpole out front where the American flag waved in the gentle breeze. She parked in her usual spot and walked through the main entrance, greeting the security guard, Mr. Thompson, who sat at his desk near the door. "Morning, Miss Patricia," he said with a friendly nod. "Good morning, Robert. How is your grandson doing? Still enjoying soccer?" "Oh, yes, ma'am. He scored 2 goals last Saturday. His whole team is doing real well this season." "That's wonderful to hear. You must be very proud." Patricia made her way to the main office, where she worked as the school secretary. The office was spacious and always smelled faintly of coffee and photocopier toner. There were filing cabinets along one wall, a row of chairs where students waited when they were called to see the principal, and Patricia's large desk near the entrance where she could greet everyone who came in. She settled into her comfortable office chair and turned on her computer. As the machine hummed to life, she organized the papers on her desk and prepared for the day ahead. Her job was to answer phone calls, greet visitors, manage student records, coordinate schedules, handle attendance reports, and generally keep everything running smoothly. She was good at it. She was organized, patient, and detail-oriented. The first students began arriving around 7:45. Patricia greeted each one with a smile. "Good morning, Michael. Don't forget you have a dentist appointment at 2 o'clock today. Your mother called yesterday to remind me." "Oh, right. Thanks, Miss Long." "Good morning, Sarah. How did your history presentation go yesterday?" "Really good. Mr. Martinez said I did an excellent job. Thank you for helping me print out those extra materials." "You're very welcome, dear. I'm glad it went well." This was what Patricia loved most about her job: the students. They were young, hopeful, full of dreams and potential. Some were shy, some were confident, some struggled with their studies, and some excelled. But they were all good kids trying to find their way in the world. Patricia tried to help each one as much as she could, even in small ways. The morning passed quickly. Patricia answered dozens of phone calls from parents, processed absence notes, helped a student who had forgotten his locker combination, made copies of a quiz for a teacher who was running late, and organized the principal's schedule for the upcoming week. At noon, she took her lunch break in the small staff lounge where she ate a sandwich she had brought from home and chatted with some of the teachers. "Did you hear about the new bakery opening on Main Street?" asked Mrs. Wilson, the English teacher. "Oh, yes. I walked past it yesterday. The owners seem very nice. They're from Philadelphia, I think," Patricia replied. "We should all go together when it opens next week," suggested Mr. Chen, the math teacher. "That sounds lovely," Patricia agreed. These were her friends now. Not FBI agents and forensic specialists, but teachers and staff members in a small-town high school. They talked about bakeries and weekend plans and whose turn it was to bring cookies to the next staff meeting. It was ordinary, and Patricia cherished that ordinariness. After lunch, Patricia returned to her desk and continued her work. Around 2:30, the principal, Dr. Reynolds, came out of his office holding a piece of paper. He looked concerned. Dr. Reynolds was a tall man in his mid-50s, with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He had been the principal of Lake Bend High School for 8 years and was well respected in the community. The fair, thoughtful, and genuinely committed to the students' well-being. "Patricia, do you have a moment?" he asked quietly. "Of course, Dr. Reynolds. Is everything all right?" He glanced around the office to make sure no students were nearby, then handed her the paper. "This came in the mail today. No return address. I'm not sure what to make of it." Patricia took the paper and read it. It was a letter, typed on ordinary white printer paper. "Lake Bend High School has enjoyed peace for too long. That peace will end soon. You cannot stop what is coming. Prepare for change." The letter was unsigned and undated, Patricia felt a chill run down her spine, not from fear, but from recognition. She had seen hundreds of threatening letters in her career. This one was vague and melodramatic, but it was still a threat. "This is concerning," Patricia said carefully. "Have you contacted the police?" "Not yet." "I wanted to get your opinion first. Do you think it's serious? We get the occasional prank, you know. Students thinking they're funny." Patricia studied the letter more closely. The typing was neat and evenly spaced, suggesting it had been done on a computer. The paper was standard office stock, available anywhere. The language was deliberately vague, but carried an ominous tone. "I think you should report it, just to be safe," Patricia said. "It may be nothing, but it's always better to let the authorities know." Dr. Reynolds nodded. "You're right. I'll call Chief Morrison this afternoon." "Thank you, Patricia." He returned to his office, and Patricia placed the letter on her desk. She stared at it for a long moment, feeling something stir inside her that she had not felt in 15 years. It was instinct, the analytical part of her mind that had once examined every detail of written threats, searching for clues about the writer's identity, education level, mental state, and intentions. She pushed the feeling away. That was not her job anymore. She was just a school secretary. Let the police handle it. But as the afternoon continued and Patricia went about her routine tasks, she could not stop thinking about the letter. That evening, Patricia attended the quilting circle at the Lake Bend Community Center as she had promised Mrs. Henderson. The community center was a cheerful building on Oak Street, where residents gathered for various activities, book clubs, exercise classes, art workshops, and social events. The quilting circle met every Tuesday evening and consisted of about a dozen women of various ages who enjoyed sewing, conversation, and mutual support. Patricia had joined the quilting circle 5 years ago, and it had become one of her favorite weekly activities. There was something meditative about the careful, repetitive work of cutting fabric, arranging patterns, and stitching pieces together to create something beautiful and useful. The quilts they made were donated to local charities, given to new mothers in the community, or raffled off to raise money for good causes. "Patricia, dear, how are you?" greeted Mrs. Henderson as Patricia entered the meeting room. "I'm well, Eleanor. And you?" "Oh, I can't complain. My daughter called from Seattle today. She's expecting her second child in March." "How wonderful! Congratulations, soon-to-be grandmother again." Patricia settled into her usual chair and pulled out the quilt square she had been working on the previous week. It was part of a larger quilt with a pattern of interlocking stars in shades of blue and gold. She threaded her needle and began stitching with practiced precision. The other women chatted about various topics: garden plans for spring, upcoming town events, a new restaurant that had opened in the neighboring town, someone's granddaughter who had just gotten engaged. Patricia participated when appropriate, offering congratulations or advice when asked, but her mind kept drifting back to the threatening letter Dr. Reynolds had received. "Patricia, you seem a bit distracted tonight," observed Mrs. Chen, the wife of the math teacher at the high school. "Is everything all right?" Patricia looked up and smiled. "Oh, I'm sorry. Just a long day at work. Nothing to worry about." "Is everything okay at the school?" asked another woman, Mrs. Rodriguez, whose son was a sophomore at Lake Bend High. "Everything's fine," Patricia assured her. "Just the usual busy day." She did not mention the letter. There was no point in alarming people unnecessarily. Dr. Reynolds would handle it through proper channels. The quilting circle continued for another hour, and by the time Patricia drove home, it was nearly dark. The streetlights along Maple Street cast a warm glow, and through the windows of neighboring houses, she could see families having dinner, watching television, living their peaceful evening lives. Patricia made herself a simple dinner of soup and salad, then settled into her favorite armchair in the living room with a mystery novel. She loved reading, especially mysteries and detective stories. There was irony in that, she knew. After spending 25 years solving real crimes, she now found relaxation in fictional ones. But as she tried to focus on the story, her thoughts kept returning to her old career. Memories she had tried to bury resurfaced, as clear and sharp as if they had happened yesterday. She remembered the training she had received at the FBI Academy, learning the science of forensic document examination. Handwriting analysis was both an art and a science, requiring years of study and practice. Every person's handwriting was unique, as individual as a fingerprint. The way someone formed their letters, the pressure they applied to the pen, the slant of their writing, the spacing between words, the style of their punctuation, all of these elements could reveal information about the writer. Patricia had been brilliant at it. She had an exceptional eye for detail and an almost intuitive understanding of the tiny variations that distinguished one person's handwriting from another's. She could look at a ransom note and determine if it was written by someone trying to disguise their natural writing style. She could examine a forged signature and identify exactly where the forger had hesitated or made an unnatural stroke. She could analyze a threatening letter and provide investigators with a profile of the likely writer. For more than 2 decades, she had been one of the FBI's most valuable assets in document analysis. She had worked on cases involving fraud, kidnapping threats, forgery, extortion, and corporate crime. She had helped identify white-collar criminals who had forged millions of dollars in checks. She had analyzed suicide notes to determine if they were genuine or if foul play was involved. She had examined historical documents to verify their authenticity. Her work had been her passion and her purpose. She had loved the challenge of solving puzzles, of finding truth hidden in the curves and strokes of handwritten or typed words. She had been good at her job, and she had known it. And then came the Kellerman case. Patricia closed her book and stared into space, the memory flooding back despite her efforts to suppress it. It had been a high-profile case involving threatening letters sent to a prominent judge. The letters had been disturbing and specific, suggesting that someone had detailed knowledge of the judge's family and daily routines. The FBI had been called in to identify the writer. Patricia had been assigned to analyze the handwriting. She had examined the letters carefully, noting every characteristic. The writing was disguised, but Patricia had identified several consistent features that she believed revealed the writer's true hand. Based on her analysis, she had concluded that the letters matched the handwriting of a man named David Kellerman, a former court clerk who had been fired for misconduct. The evidence had seemed clear to her. The FBI had arrested Kellerman. The case had gone to trial, with Patricia testifying as an expert witness. Based partly on her testimony, Kellerman had been convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison. 3 months into his sentence, new evidence had emerged. Another set of threatening letters had been sent, this time to a different judge. The handwriting analysis conducted by a different expert had identified the real culprit, a disturbed individual named Marcus Thornton who had no connection to David Kellerman whatsoever. Further investigation revealed that Thornton had deliberately studied Kellerman's handwriting and mimicked certain features to frame him. He had been clever and patient, creating a false trail that even an experienced analyst like Patricia had followed. Kellerman had been immediately released and exonerated, but the damage had been done. An innocent man had spent 3 months in prison. His reputation had been destroyed. His marriage had fallen apart. His career was ruined. His life had been shattered because of a mistake, because of Patricia's mistake. The FBI had reviewed her analysis and determined that while the case had been complex and the deception sophisticated, the errors Patricia had made in her conclusions. She had been too confident, had not considered alternative possibilities thoroughly enough, had allowed the pressure of a high-profile case to influence her judgment. The guilt had been overwhelming. She had prided herself on her accuracy, her thoroughness, her dedication to truth and justice. And yet she had helped convict an innocent man. The FBI had not fired her. In fact, her supervisors had been relatively understanding, acknowledging that the case had involved an unusually skilled forgery. They had offered her support and encouraged her to continue her work. But Patricia had not been able to forgive herself. She had tried to apologize to David Kellerman, but he had refused to see her. She had not blamed him. What could she say? Sorry I destroyed your life? Sorry I was wrong? Words were meaningless in the face of such harm. She had resigned from the FBI 6 months after Kellerman's release. She had sold her apartment in Washington, D.C., packed her few belongings, and driven north until she found Lake Bend, a small town where no one knew her name or her history. She had taken the job as a school secretary, a position where her organizational skills were useful, but where she could never again make a mistake that would ruin someone's life. For 15 years, she had lived quietly, trying to atone for her error through small acts of kindness and helpfulness. She could not undo the harm she had caused, but she could try to be a better person, a more careful person, a more humble person. She had never told anyone in Lake Bend about her past. As far as the town knew, Patricia Long was a widow who had moved from the city to enjoy a quieter life in her later years. They did not know about the FBI, about the cases she had solved, or about the terrible mistake that haunted her still. Patricia set down her book and went to bed, but sleep did not come easily. She lay awake thinking about the threatening letter at the school, wondering if she should have said more to Dr. Reynolds, wondering if her old instincts could still be trusted. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, she fell into a restless sleep. Over the next week, Patricia tried to put the threatening letter out of her mind and focus on her work. Dr. Reynolds had reported it to the local police, and Chief Morrison had said he would investigate. There was nothing more to be done. But on Thursday afternoon, Dr. Reynolds received a second letter. This one was more specific. Your students walk in ignorance. Their peaceful days are numbered. The price of complacency will be paid. Watch and wait. Dr. Reynolds showed it to Patricia with a worried expression. This one is worse, he said. It mentions the students directly. Patricia examined the letter carefully. Like the first one, it was typed on plain white paper, with no signature or return address. The postmark on the envelope showed it had been mailed from Lake Bend itself. The language is similar to the first letter, Patricia observed. Same dramatic tone, same vague threats. But yes, it's more focused on the school. I've called Chief Morrison again, Dr. Reynolds said. He's coming by this afternoon to pick it up. Chief Morrison arrived an hour later. He was a stocky man in his early 60s with a crew cut and a no-nonsense manner. He had been the police chief in Lake Bend for more than 20 years and took his responsibility to protect the town seriously. Dr. Reynolds, Miss Long, he greeted them. Let me see this second letter. Patricia handed him both letters, and he read them carefully, his expression growing more serious. I don't like this, he said. These threats are becoming more direct. We need to take this seriously. What can we do? Dr. Reynolds asked. I'll increase patrols around the school. I'll also look into whether anyone in town has a grudge against the school or has been acting suspiciously. Have you noticed anything unusual? Anyone who seems angry or resentful? Dr. Reynolds thought for a moment. Not really. We had to let go a janitor last year for repeated absences, but he moved out of town. There was a parent who was upset about her son's grades last semester, but that was resolved. I can't think of anyone who would send threatening letters. What about students? Any disciplinary issues? The usual teenage drama, but nothing that would lead to this kind of behavior. Chief Morrison turned to Patricia. Miss Long, you see everyone who comes through this office. Have you noticed anything unusual? Patricia hesitated. Should she mention her professional opinion about the letters? Should she reveal her expertise? No, she decided. That part of her life was over. She was just a secretary now. Nothing unusual, Chief, she said. But I'll keep my eyes open. Please do. Both of you. If you receive any more letters or notice anything suspicious, call me immediately. And Dr. Reynolds, I think you should inform the school board and the teachers about this situation. Not to cause panic, but people need to be alert. After Chief Morrison left, Patricia returned to her desk. She tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept analyzing the letters. Despite her resolve to stay out of it, her training kicked in automatically. The writer was educated, judging by the correct spelling and grammar. The language was deliberately theatrical, suggesting someone who wanted to create fear and uncertainty. The threats were vague, which could mean the writer did not have a specific plan or wanted to maximize psychological impact. The fact that the letters were mailed locally suggested the writer lived in or near Lake Bend. Patricia shook her head. Stop it, she told herself. This is not your responsibility. You're not an analyst anymore. Let the police handle it. But old habits were difficult to break. That weekend, 2 more businesses in Lake Bend received threatening letters. The owner of the local hardware store and the manager of the town's small grocery store both reported receiving unsigned letters with ominous messages about coming changes and the end of peace. The news spread quickly through the small town. By Monday morning, everyone in Lake Bend was talking about the mysterious letters. People were worried and confused. Who would send such threats? What did they want? Was the town in danger? Dr. Reynolds called a staff meeting before school started on Monday. All the teachers and staff members gathered in the library, and Chief Morrison was there to address their concerns. I want everyone to stay calm, Chief Morrison began. We're dealing with someone who is trying to scare people, but so far these are just words on paper. There have been no actual acts of violence or vandalism. My department is investigating, and we're taking every precaution. Should we be worried about the safety of the students? Asked Mrs. Wilson. I'm increasing police presence around the school and other public areas. I'm also asking everyone to be vigilant. If you see anything unusual, report it immediately. If you receive a threatening letter, do not touch it more than necessary and bring it to me right away. Do you have any leads? Asked Mr. Chen. We're pursuing several possibilities, but I can't discuss details of an ongoing investigation. What I can tell you is that we're doing everything we can to identify the person responsible. After the meeting, Patricia went to her desk feeling deeply unsettled. The situation was escalating. More letters meant the writer was becoming more active. And the vague nature of the threats made it impossible to know what, if anything, the writer was planning to do. Throughout the day, Patricia could sense the tension in the school. Students whispered to each other about the threatening letters. Parents called to ask if their children were safe. Teachers tried to maintain normalcy, but everyone was on edge. During her lunch break, Patricia went to the staff lounge and found several teachers discussing the situation. I heard that the letters are all typed the same way, said Mrs. Rodriguez, who worked as a teacher's aide. Same font, same paper. But no fingerprints, added Mr. Chen. The police checked. Whoever is doing this knows how to cover their tracks, observed Mrs. Wilson. Patricia listened quietly, sipping her tea. What do you think, Patricia? Asked Mrs. Wilson. You're always so observant. Have you noticed anyone acting strangely? Patricia considered the question carefully. I've been thinking about it, but I honestly can't pinpoint anyone specific. Whoever is sending these letters is being very careful. It's so scary, said Mrs. Rodriguez. I have a son at this school. I want to know he's safe. We all do, Patricia said gently. But Chief Morrison is doing everything he can. We need to trust that he'll find whoever is responsible. But even as she spoke these reassuring words, Patricia felt a growing sense of unease. Her instincts, honed by 25 years of analyzing criminal communications, told her that these letters were building toward something. The writer had a purpose, and it was not just to cause fear. That evening, Patricia went home and sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea. She thought about David Kellerman, the man whose life she had inadvertently destroyed. She thought about the oath she had made to herself never to get involved in criminal investigations again. But she also thought about the students at Lake Bend High School. She thought about Michael, who always forgot his appointments. She thought about Sarah, who had worked so hard on her history presentation. She thought about all the young people who came through the school office with their hopes and worries and dreams. If her expertise could help protect them, did she have a moral obligation to use it? Or would getting involved risk making another terrible mistake? Patricia did not sleep well that night. On Wednesday morning, Patricia arrived at school to find Dr. Reynolds waiting for her in the office. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. "Patricia, we have a problem," he said quietly. "I received another letter at my home address last night. It was slipped through my mail slot sometime after midnight." He handed her the letter, and Patricia's hands trembled slightly as she took it. "The administration thinks it can control everything, but control is an illusion. Soon everyone will see the truth. The structure you built will crumble. Count the days." Patricia read the letter twice, her analytical mind automatically processing every word, every phrase. "This is different from the others," she said slowly. "This one is more personal. It's directed specifically at you." "I know," Dr. Reynolds said, and there was real fear in his voice. "Whoever is doing this knows where I live. They came to my house, Patricia. What if my wife had been the one to find this? What if they come back?" "Did you call Chief Morrison?" "He's on his way." "But Patricia—" Dr. Reynolds paused, looking at her intently. "You've been analyzing these letters, haven't you? I've seen you studying them. You notice details that others miss. Is there something you're not telling me?" Patricia felt her heart race. This was the moment. She could continue to hide her past, or she could be honest. "Dr. Reynolds," she said carefully, "before I came to Lake Bend, I had a different career. I worked for many years as a forensic document analyst. I examined handwriting and typed documents for criminal investigations." Dr. Reynolds's eyes widened in surprise. "You worked in law enforcement?" "For the FBI, actually. For 25 years. I analyzed threatening letters, forged documents, anonymous communications. It was my job to identify who wrote them and why." "Why didn't you ever mention this?" Patricia looked down at the letter in her hands. "Because I made a terrible mistake in my last case. An innocent man was wrongly convicted partly because of my analysis. When I realized what I had done, I couldn't continue. I resigned and came here to start over." There was a long silence. Finally, Dr. Reynolds spoke. "But you could help us now, couldn't you? You could analyze these letters and maybe figure out who's sending them." "I could try," Patricia admitted. "But I'm afraid of being wrong again. What if I point the investigation in the wrong direction? What if another innocent person gets hurt because of me?" Dr. Reynolds sat down heavily in one of the waiting chairs. "Patricia, I understand your fear, but right now, we have someone threatening our school, our students, our community. Chief Morrison is a good man, but he doesn't have the expertise you have. If there's even a chance you could help identify this person, don't you think you should try? For 15 years, she had avoided this moment. She had promised herself never to use her analytical skills again, never to risk causing harm through her judgments. But now, looking at Dr. Reynolds's worried face and thinking about the hundreds of students who walked through the school doors every day, she realized that inaction was also a choice. If she remained silent and something terrible happened, would that not also be a failure? "I'll need to see all the letters," Patricia said quietly. "Not just the ones sent to the school, but the ones received by the hardware store and the grocery store too. And I'll need to be completely honest with Chief Morrison about my background." "I'll call him right now and explain," Dr. Reynolds said, relief evident in his voice. "Thank you, Patricia." Chief Morrison arrived 30 minutes later. Dr. Reynolds explained Patricia's background, and the police chief listened with increasing interest. "Is this true, Miss Long? You worked for the FBI as a document analyst?" "Yes, Chief Morrison. For 25 years, I specialized in handwriting analysis and forensic document examination." "And you didn't think to mention this when the first letter arrived?" Patricia met his gaze steadily. "I left that career behind for a reason. I made a serious mistake in a case, and an innocent man suffered because of my error. I swore I would never put myself in a position to cause that kind of harm again." Chief Morrison was quiet for a moment, considering. "I appreciate your honesty, but right now, I have a town full of scared people and no solid leads. If you have expertise that could help, I'm willing to listen. But I need to know. Can I trust your analysis?" "I can't promise I'll be right," Patricia said honestly. "Document analysis is not an exact science, especially with typed letters where there's no handwriting to examine. But I can look for patterns, language choices, psychological indicators. I can provide you with possibilities, but you would need to verify everything through proper investigation." "Fair enough," Chief Morrison said. "Let's start with what we have. I'll bring you copies of all the letters we've collected. You examine them and tell me what you see." That afternoon, Chief Morrison returned with photocopies of all 7 threatening letters that had been received so far. 3 sent to the school, 1 to the hardware store, 1 to the grocery store, 1 to the town library, and the latest one delivered to Dr. Reynolds's home. Patricia spread the letters out on her desk after school hours, when the office was quiet and empty. She put on her reading glasses and began what she had not done in 15 years, a systematic forensic analysis. First, she examined the physical characteristics. All the letters were typed on standard white printer paper, the kind available at any office supply store. The font was Times New Roman, 12-point, a common default setting. The printing quality was consistent, suggesting the same printer had been used for all of them. Next, she studied the language and content. The writer had a specific style: dramatic, pseudo-philosophical, focused on themes of ignorance, complacency, control, and coming change. The vocabulary was sophisticated, but not overly technical. The grammar was correct. There were no spelling errors. Patricia made notes on a legal pad. Writer is educated, probably college level, comfortable with formal language, enjoys creating atmosphere of dread and inevitability, uses abstract concepts rather than specific threats, no profanity or crude language, suggests intellectual pretensions. She looked at the pattern of delivery. The first letters had been mailed through the postal service, but the most recent one, delivered to Dr. Reynolds's home, had been hand-delivered. This suggested the writer was becoming bolder, more confident, perhaps more unstable. The targets were also revealing. The school, the hardware store, the grocery store, the library, all were institutions representing community stability and normalcy. The writer was not threatening individuals randomly, but was focusing on places that symbolized the orderly functioning of Lake Bend. Patricia wrote more notes. Writer has grievance against community institutions. Feels that Lake Bend represents something false or oppressive. Language suggests desire to reveal truth and cause awakening. Possible grudge against authority or social structures. May have experienced rejection or exclusion from community. She sat back and thought about who in Lake Bend might fit this profile. Someone educated but resentful. Someone who felt they had been wronged by the town's institutions. Someone who had access to a computer and printer, who knew the town well enough to deliver letters by hand, who had enough free time to plan and execute this campaign of intimidation. An idea began to form in Patricia's mind, but she pushed it away. It was too early for conclusions. She needed more information. That evening, Patricia called Chief Morrison and asked if she could meet with him the next morning. He agreed, and they met at the police station, a small brick building on the edge of town. Patricia brought her notes and walked Chief Morrison through her analysis. He listened carefully, occasionally asking questions. "So, you think we're looking for someone educated, probably someone who feels wronged by the community?" he summarized. "That's my assessment based on the language and targets, but it's only a theory," Patricia cautioned. "I could be wrong." "Do you have any specific suspects in mind?" "Not yet. I need to know more about people who have had conflicts with these institutions. Has anyone been fired from the school recently? Has anyone had disputes with the stores or the library?" Chief Morrison pulled out a file. "I've been looking into that. The school let go a janitor named Frank Williams about 18 months ago for excessive absences, but he moved to Ohio. The hardware store had a dispute with a contractor named Mike Sullivan over a billing issue last year, but it was resolved, and Sullivan seems content. The grocery store had a shoplifting incident involving a teenager, but that was handled through the juvenile system." "What about the library?" Patricia asked. "Nothing comes to mind. It's just a quiet place where people borrow books. Mrs. Peterson has been the librarian there for 30 years. Patricia thought for a moment. "Could I see a list of recent employees or volunteers at these locations? Sometimes patterns emerge when you look at connections." "I can request that information," Chief Morrison said. "But Miss Long, I need to ask, how confident are you in this analysis? Are we heading in the right direction?" "But document analysis is only one tool in an investigation. You should continue pursuing all possible leads and not rely solely on my interpretation." Chief Morrison nodded. "Fair enough. I'll follow up on this and get back to you." As Patricia left the police station, she felt both exhilarated and terrified. She was using her old skills again, the skills she had thought were buried forever. Part of her felt alive in a way she had not felt in 15 years. But another part whispered warnings. Remember David Kellerman. Remember what happens when you're wrong. Over the next several days, Patricia continued her quiet investigation while maintaining her regular duties at the school. Chief Morrison provided her with information about recent employees and volunteers at the targeted institutions, and Patricia spent her evenings reviewing the records, looking for connections. On Saturday afternoon, as she sat in her living room with papers spread across her coffee table, she noticed something interesting. One name appeared on multiple lists: Thomas Brennan. Thomas Brennan had been a substitute teacher at Lake Bend High School 3 years ago. He had also volunteered at the library. And according to the hardware store's records, he had opened a small business account there that he had later closed. Patricia researched further. Thomas Brennan had moved to Lake Bend 5 years ago after losing his teaching position at a school in New Jersey. According to the information she could find, he had been let go due to conflicts with the administration over curriculum decisions. He had taught English and had a master's degree in literature. In Lake Bend, he had worked as a substitute teacher for about a year, but he had not been offered a permanent position. After that, he had taken various part-time jobs around town. Currently, according to the local phone directory, he lived in a rented apartment above the old pharmacy on Main Street. Patricia made more notes. Brennan fit several elements of her profile. Educated, specifically in literature, which would explain the sophisticated language of the letters. He had experience with school systems and had been passed over for a permanent position, which could create resentment. He was familiar with the town's institutions, but this was all circumstantial. She needed more before she could say anything to Chief Morrison. On Monday morning, Patricia decided to take a discreet walk through town during her lunch break. She wanted to get a sense of where Thomas Brennan lived and whether there was anything notable about his circumstances. The old pharmacy building was in the historic part of Main Street, a 3-story brick structure that had been converted into apartments on the upper floors. Patricia walked past it casually, glancing up at the windows. She could see that the second-floor apartment had curtains drawn across the windows, even in the middle of the day. As she continued her walk, Patricia stopped at the hardware store to buy some light bulbs she did not really need. While there, she chatted casually with the owner, Mr. Patterson. "Such strange times we're having with these threatening letters," Patricia said sympathetically. "How are you holding up?" "It's unsettling, I'll admit," Mr. Patterson replied. "Makes you wonder who would do such a thing. I've been in this town for 40 years and never seen anything like it." "Have you had any unusual customers recently? Anyone who seemed angry or resentful?" Mr. Patterson thought for a moment. "Not really. Most of my customers are regulars. Although—" He paused. "Yes?" Patricia encouraged. "Well, there was that fellow Brennan who used to have an account here. Thomas Brennan. He closed it suddenly about 6 months ago, said he didn't need it anymore. I always thought that was odd because he was planning to start a small home repair business. But then he just dropped the whole thing. Do you know why? He said the town wasn't ready for new ideas, something like that. He seemed bitter about it, but I didn't think much of it at the time." Patricia thanked Mr. Patterson and left the store, her mind working quickly. Brennan had spoken about the town not being ready for new ideas. That language echoed the themes in the threatening letters about ignorance and complacency. She went to the library next, the one public institution she had not yet visited during her investigation. Mrs. Peterson, the elderly librarian, greeted her warmly. "Patricia, how lovely to see you. Are you here for the new mystery novels? I just put several on the shelf." "Actually, I'm curious about the library's volunteer program," Patricia said. "I'm thinking of volunteering, and I wondered what it involves." "Oh, how wonderful! We always need help. Volunteers mostly help with shelving books, organizing events, and assisting patrons. We've had some wonderful volunteers over the years." "I heard Thomas Brennan used to volunteer here. Is he still involved?" Mrs. Peterson's expression changed slightly. "Oh, Thomas. No, he hasn't volunteered in more than a year. He was very enthusiastic at first, but then he became difficult." "Difficult how?" "He had very strong opinions about which books the library should carry and which ones we should remove. He wanted us to focus more on classic literature and less on popular fiction. He gave me a whole list of books he thought were lowbrow and damaging to community intellect. I explained that a public library serves diverse tastes, but he didn't take it well." "What happened?" "He stopped volunteering. Said we were contributing to the dumbing down of society or something like that. It was quite unpleasant." Patricia thanked Mrs. Peterson and left the library with a growing conviction that Thomas Brennan was indeed the person sending the threatening letters. His profile matched, his language matched, his connections to the targeted institutions matched, and he had demonstrated resentment toward community establishments. But she needed proof, and she needed to be absolutely certain before she said anything to Chief Morrison. The memory of David Kellerman loomed large in her mind. That evening, Patricia did something she had not done in 15 years. She called an old colleague from the FBI. Dr. James Chen had been one of the behavioral analysts Patricia had worked with on various cases. He had retired 2 years ago and now lived in Vermont, but they had exchanged Christmas cards occasionally, and Patricia knew he would remember her. "Patricia Long, this is a surprise," Dr. Chen said when he answered the phone. "How are you? It's been what, 15 years? 16, actually." "I'm doing well, James. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." "Not at all. My wife and I just finished dinner. To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" Patricia explained the situation in Lake Bend, leaving out some details, but giving Dr. Chen enough information to understand the case. She also told him about Thomas Brennan and her suspicions. "Based on what you're telling me, your assessment sounds reasonable," Dr. Chen said after listening carefully. "But Patricia, I have to ask, why are you involved in this? I thought you left all of this behind." "I did, but it's happening in my town, to people I care about. I couldn't just ignore it." "I understand, but you need to be careful. Your analysis is based on psychological profiling and linguistic patterns, which are valuable tools, but not definitive proof. You need physical evidence." "I know. That's why I'm calling you. What would you do in this situation?" Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment, thinking. "If I were you, I would look for a way to obtain a verified sample of Brennan's typing, something that can be definitively attributed to him. Compare it with the threatening letters. Look for linguistic patterns, favorite phrases, punctuation quirks. People have habits in their writing that are hard to disguise, even when they're trying to be anonymous." "How would I get such a sample? Does he have social media? A blog? Has he written letters to the editor of the local newspaper? Look for any public writing he's done." After thanking Dr. Chen and ending the call, Patricia spent the evening searching online for anything written by Thomas Brennan. She found a blog he had maintained sporadically over the past 2 years. It was called Truth in a False World and contained essays about literature, philosophy, and his criticisms of modern society. As Patricia read through the blog posts, her conviction grew stronger. The writing style was remarkably similar to the threatening letters. Brennan used the same elevated dramatic language. He frequently wrote about themes of ignorance, false comfort, and the need for people to face difficult truths. He criticized institutions and social structures that he believed kept people complacent. In one blog post from 8 months ago, he had written, "The sleepy town where I live is content in its ignorance. People go about their daily routines, buying their hardware and groceries, borrowing their mindless entertainment from the library, sending their children to schools that teach conformity rather than critical thinking. They have no idea how hollow their existence is. Someday, they will have to face reality." Patricia read that passage 3 times. The language was almost identical to the threatening letters. The references to hardware, groceries, libraries, and schools were too specific to be coincidental. She printed out several of the blog posts and placed them next to the photocopies of the threatening letters. The parallels were clear. But was this enough? Patricia wrestled with the question. She had psychological profile evidence, she had linguistic pattern matching, she had motive and opportunity. But she did not have physical proof that Brennan had written and sent the letters. She thought about David Kellerman again. She thought about the terrible consequences of being wrong. And then she made her decision. She would take what she had found to Chief Morrison, but she would present it as a theory, not a conclusion. She would recommend that he investigate further, but she would make clear that her analysis alone was not sufficient for an arrest. On Tuesday morning, Patricia met with Chief Morrison and showed him everything she had found. She walked him through her analysis of Thomas Brennan, the blog posts, the linguistic similarities, and the profile match. Chief Morrison listened intently, occasionally taking notes. When Patricia finished, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "This is good work, Miss Long. Really good. But you're right that we need more before we can act. I can't arrest someone based on similar writing styles and the fact that he didn't like the library's book selection." "I know," Patricia said, "but I think there's enough here to justify putting him under surveillance and investigating further." "Agreed. I'll have officers watch his apartment discreetly. If he's planning to send or deliver more letters, maybe we can catch him in the act. In the meantime, I'll also look into whether we can obtain a warrant to search his apartment, but that might be difficult without more concrete evidence." "There's one other thing you could try," Patricia suggested. "You could arrange for a controlled situation where Brennan might reveal himself. If he thinks his letters are having the desired effect, he might become bolder." "What do you have in mind?" Patricia thought carefully. "What if the school, the hardware store, and the other targeted locations made a public statement? Something that would challenge the writer's message? If Brennan is the one sending these letters, he might not be able to resist responding." Chief Morrison considered this. "That's risky. It could escalate the situation." "It could. But right now, we're waiting passively for the next letter. If we can provoke a response, we might get the evidence we need." "Let me think about it," Chief Morrison said. "And let me run it by Dr. Reynolds and the other business owners. In the meantime, good work on this, Miss Long. You've given us our first real lead." As Patricia left the police station, she felt a complex mixture of emotions. She was proud of the analytical work she had done, work that reminded her of her capabilities and her former purpose. But she was also afraid. What if she was wrong about Brennan? What if her analysis led the investigation astray and the real threat was overlooked? Over the next few days, Chief Morrison quietly investigated Thomas Brennan. He learned that Brennan had no criminal record, that he paid his rent on time, that he kept to himself mostly, but was not hostile or threatening in his daily interactions. He worked part-time at a local bookstore and seemed to spend most of his free time alone in his apartment. The surveillance Chief Morrison had arranged showed that Brennan followed a regular routine: work at the bookstore 3 days a week, occasional walks around town, trips to the grocery store, and long hours in his apartment. Nothing suspicious or incriminating. But on Friday evening, Brennan did something interesting. He walked to the post office just before it closed and mailed 2 envelopes. The officer watching him could not see what was in the envelopes or where they were addressed. Chief Morrison made a decision. He contacted the postmaster and, with proper legal justification, arranged to intercept any mail sent by Thomas Brennan before it was delivered. On Saturday morning, 2 letters were intercepted. Both were addressed to local residents, and both contained threatening messages similar to the previous ones. Chief Morrison called Patricia immediately. "We've got him. The letters he mailed yesterday were more threats. We have grounds now for a search warrant." Patricia felt her heart racing. "What are you going to do?" "I'm getting a warrant this afternoon. We'll search his apartment tomorrow morning. I'd like you to be there, if you're willing." "You might spot something that my officers would miss." Patricia hesitated. Going to Brennan's apartment felt like crossing a line, like becoming fully involved in law enforcement again. But she had already crossed that line when she agreed to analyze the letters. "I'll be there," she said. On Sunday morning, Patricia met Chief Morrison and 2 of his officers outside the old pharmacy building. They had obtained a search warrant, and Brennan had been brought to the police station for questioning. As they climbed the stairs to the second-floor apartment, Patricia felt a strange sense of déjà vu. She had participated in dozens of searches during her FBI career, but this was different. This was her town, her community, and the outcome mattered to her in a personal way. Chief Morrison knocked on the apartment door, announced their purpose, and used the key the landlord had provided to enter. The apartment was small but neat. There was a living room with a sofa and bookshelves filled with classic literature and philosophy texts, a small kitchen with a table and 2 chairs, a bedroom with a simple bed and desk, and in the bedroom, on the desk, they found a computer and a printer. Chief Morrison put on gloves and carefully examined the printer. "It's the same model as the one used for the threatening letters," he noted. Patricia looked around the room, observing details. On the wall above the desk, Brennan had taped up pages of his own writing, what looked like drafts of essays or manifestos. She read some of them, seeing familiar themes and language. Then she noticed something on the desk itself, a stack of white printer paper, identical to the paper used for the threatening letters, and next to it, several envelopes. One of the officers found a filing box under the desk. Inside were drafts of letters, including earlier versions of the threatening messages that had been sent around town. Brennan had kept copies of everything. "This is it," Chief Morrison said with satisfaction. "This is all the evidence we need." Patricia felt relieved, but also sad. Thomas Brennan was clearly a troubled man who had let his resentments and frustrations lead him to threaten his own community. He had not actually hurt anyone, but he had spread fear and anxiety, and now he would face legal consequences. Later that afternoon, after Brennan had been formally arrested and charged with making terrorist threats and harassment, Chief Morrison held a press conference in front of the police station. The entire town seemed to have gathered to hear the news. "I'm pleased to announce that we have identified and arrested the individual responsible for the threatening letters that have troubled our community over the past 2 weeks," Chief Morrison said. Thomas Brennan, age 42, has been charged with multiple counts of criminal threatening. Thanks to excellent investigative work and community cooperation, we were able to bring this situation to a peaceful conclusion. Someone in the crowd shouted, "How did you catch him?" Chief Morrison glanced at Patricia, who was standing at the back of the crowd. "We had help from someone with specialized expertise in document analysis. But I want to emphasize that this was a team effort involving careful investigation and proper legal procedures." The crowd asked more questions, but Patricia slipped away quietly. She did not want attention or praise. She had done what she could to help protect her community, but she had no desire to be celebrated for it. As she walked home through the familiar streets of Lake Bend, she thought about Thomas Brennan. He would likely face prison time, though probably not a lengthy sentence, since he had not actually carried out any of his vague threats. He would get psychological counseling, and eventually, he would have to rebuild his life. Just like David Kellerman had to rebuild his life after Patricia's mistake. But this time, Patricia had been right. The evidence was clear and conclusive. Brennan had written the letters, and he had admitted to it under questioning. There was no doubt, no possibility of error. This time, she had helped bring justice without causing harm to an innocent person. On Monday morning, Patricia arrived at school to find that word of her role in solving the case had spread throughout Lake Bend. The local newspaper had published an article about the arrest, and although Chief Morrison had not named her publicly, enough people had pieced together her involvement. As Patricia walked through the school hallway toward the office, students and teachers stopped her to express their thanks and amazement. "Miss Long, is it true you used to work for the FBI?" asked Sarah, the student who had done the history presentation. "I did, yes, many years ago," Patricia admitted. "That's so cool. Why didn't you ever tell us?" "It was a different part of my life, dear. I'm quite happy being your school secretary now." In the office, Dr. Reynolds was waiting with a grateful smile. "Patricia, I don't know how to thank you. You probably saved this school from a prolonged nightmare. Who knows how far Brennan might have gone if you hadn't figured out who he was." "I just provided analysis, Dr. Reynolds. Chief Morrison and his team did the actual investigative work. Don't be modest. You used your expertise to protect our community. That takes courage, especially given what you told me about your past. Throughout the day, Patricia received similar expressions of gratitude and curiosity from nearly everyone she encountered. It was overwhelming and uncomfortable. She was not accustomed to being the center of attention. At lunch, the teachers in the staff lounge peppered her with questions. "Why did you leave the FBI?" asked Mr. Chen. Patricia had known this question would come. She took a deep breath and decided to tell the truth. "I made a serious mistake in a case. My analysis led to an innocent man being convicted of a crime he didn't commit. When I realized what had happened, I couldn't continue. I felt I had lost the right to do that kind of work." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Mrs. Wilson spoke gently. "But you came back to it when we needed you. That must have been difficult." "It was terrifying," Patricia admitted. "I was afraid of making another mistake. But I decided that refusing to help when I had the ability to do so would be a different kind of failure." "Well, I'm glad you made that choice," said Mrs. Rodriguez. "My son feels safe at school again thanks to you." That evening, as Patricia sat in her living room reflecting on the events of the past few weeks, her phone rang. It was Chief Morrison. "Miss Long, I wanted to give you an update on Thomas Brennan," he said. "We've been interviewing him extensively, and I thought you'd want to know what we've learned." "I appreciate that, Chief. How is he?" "He's been cooperative. He admitted everything. The letters, the planning, the motivation. It's actually quite sad. He's a very intelligent man who became consumed by bitterness and a sense of intellectual superiority. He genuinely believed that Lake Bend was full of ignorant, complacent people who needed to be awakened to some higher truth." "Did he have any specific plans beyond sending the letters?" "Not really. That's the strange part. He had no intention of actually harming anyone. He said he just wanted to disturb people's peace, to make them question their assumptions, to create productive anxiety. He thought of himself as a kind of philosophical provocateur." Patricia sighed. So much fear and disruption for such an abstract purpose. Indeed. The prosecutor is recommending a sentence that includes mandatory psychological counseling. Brennan clearly needs help, but he will serve some jail time as well. After the call ended, Patricia thought about Brennan's motivations. In a way, she understood the dangerous combination of intelligence and isolation that could lead someone to such behavior. Brennan had felt superior to those around him, had become disconnected from empathy and community, and had convinced himself that his actions were justified by some higher philosophical purpose. It was a reminder that intelligence without wisdom, knowledge without compassion, and conviction without humility could be destructive. Over the next few weeks, life in Lake Bend gradually returned to normal. The threatening letters became a story people told about that strange time when someone tried to scare the town. Thomas Brennan's name became synonymous with cautionary tales about allowing resentment to fester, and Patricia Long became known as something more than the friendly school secretary. She was now also the retired FBI analyst who had protected the community, the expert who had emerged from quiet retirement to solve a mystery. At first, Patricia was uncomfortable with this new identity. She had spent 15 years trying to be invisible, trying to atone for her past mistake through humble service. But slowly, she began to accept that perhaps her error with David Kellerman did not have to define the rest of her life. One afternoon, about a month after Brennan's arrest, Patricia received an unexpected visitor at the school office. A man in his mid-50s, neatly dressed in a business suit, approached her desk. "Excuse me, are you Patricia Long?" he asked. "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" The man extended his hand. My name is David Kellerman. Patricia felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her. For a moment, she could not speak. Finally, she managed, Mr. Kellerman, I don't know what to say. I read about what happened here in Lake Bend, Kellerman said. The article mentioned that a retired FBI analyst had helped solve the case. It took some investigating, but I managed to confirm it was you. Mr. Kellerman, I want you to know how deeply sorry I am for what happened to you. I have thought about it every day for 16 years. If I could undo that mistake, if I could give you back those months you spent in prison, I would. I know my apology means nothing compared to what you suffered, but I am truly, profoundly sorry. Kellerman looked at her for a long moment, then said, Can we talk somewhere private? Patricia led him to a small conference room adjacent to the office. They sat across from each other at the table, and Patricia braced herself for his anger, his accusation, his rightful condemnation. But instead, Kellerman said, I spent a long time being angry at you, Miss Long. When I was released from prison, all I wanted was to see you suffer the way I had suffered. I blamed you for the destruction of my marriage, my career, my reputation. You had every right to feel that way. Yes, I did. But over the years, I've come to understand something. You made a mistake, but you didn't act with malice. You were deceived by someone who deliberately tried to frame me. You were doing your job to the best of your ability, and when the truth came out, you took responsibility. You didn't make excuses. You resigned from a career you had dedicated decades to. Patricia felt tears welling in her eyes. That doesn't excuse what happened to you. No, it doesn't. Nothing can. But I've learned that carrying anger and resentment for years only hurts the person carrying it. I've rebuilt my life. I remarried. I have a good job and a family. The experience changed me, but it didn't destroy me. I'm glad to hear that, Mr. Kellerman. Truly glad. I came here today to tell you something I should have told you years ago, but I wasn't ready then. I forgive you, Miss Long, and I want you to forgive yourself. The tears Patricia had been holding back began to fall. Thank you, she whispered. You don't know what that means to me. I think I do, Kellerman said gently. I also want to tell you that what you did here in Lake Bend was important. You used your expertise to protect people. You came back to work you were afraid to do because it was the right thing. That takes real courage. Don't let one mistake, even a serious one, overshadow all the good you've done and can still do. They talked for another hour. Kellerman told her about his life now, about his children, about the nonprofit organization he had started to help exonerated prisoners reintegrate into society. Patricia told him about her 15 years in Lake Bend, about the students she had helped, about the quiet life she had built. When Kellerman finally stood to leave, he shook her hand again. I'm glad I came, Miss Long. I hope you can find peace now. I hope the same for you, Mr. Kellerman. And thank you. Thank you for your generosity and your forgiveness. After he left, Patricia sat in the conference room for a long time, letting the tears flow freely. She had spent 16 years carrying a burden of guilt, believing she deserved no forgiveness, no redemption, no second chance. But Kellerman had given her something precious, the possibility of moving forward without the weight of unresolved shame. Spring came to Lake Bend with a burst of color and warmth. The trees along Maple Street bloomed with pink and white blossoms. The gardens throughout town filled with tulips, daffodils, and crocuses. The days grew longer, and the air carried the sweet scent of renewal. Patricia continued her work at Lake Bend High School, but with a new sense of purpose. She was no longer hiding from her past or trying to disappear into quiet anonymity. She had accepted that she was both the woman who had made a terrible mistake and the woman who had the expertise to help others. Both truths could exist simultaneously. The school board, impressed by how Patricia had helped resolve the threatening letter situation, approached her with a proposal. They wanted to create a new position, Director of School Safety and Security. They wanted Patricia to take the job. Patricia was initially hesitant. It would mean leaving her comfortable role as secretary and taking on more responsibility. It would mean using her analytical skills more regularly. It would mean acknowledging publicly that she was a trained expert in security and threat assessment. But after thinking about it carefully and discussing it with Dr. Reynolds and Chief Morrison, she accepted. In her new role, Patricia developed safety protocols for the school, trained staff on how to recognize warning signs of potential threats, and established better communication channels between the school and local law enforcement. She also started a student mentoring program, working with young people who were struggling with anger, isolation, or feelings of alienation, the very feelings that had led Thomas Brennan down a destructive path. Patricia found that she was good at talking to troubled students. She did not lecture or condemn. She listened. She asked questions. She helped them understand that their feelings were valid, but that their responses to those feelings could be chosen. She shared, in appropriate ways, her own story of making a terrible mistake and learning to live with it, to grow from it, to find redemption through service to others. One student in particular benefited from Patricia's mentoring. His name was Alex, a 16-year-old who had been getting into frequent fights and was at risk of expulsion. Patricia met with him weekly, and over time, he began to open up about his anger at his father who had abandoned the family, his frustration with teachers who he felt did not understand him, his feeling that the world was unfair and hostile. "I know how you feel," Patricia told him one afternoon as they sat in her office. "Maybe not the exact same situation, but I know what it's like to feel that you've been wronged, that you're carrying something painful inside you." "Yeah?" Alex said skeptically. "What happened to you?" Patricia made a decision in that moment. "When I was younger, I had an important job. I was supposed to help find the truth. But I made a mistake, and because of that mistake, an innocent person went to prison. When I realized what I had done, I felt like my whole world had collapsed. I felt like I didn't deserve to be happy or successful." Alex looked at her with new interest. "What did you do?" "At first, I ran away from it. I left my career, moved here, tried to become someone else. But recently, I learned that running away from mistakes doesn't make them disappear. You have to acknowledge them, learn from them, and then find ways to do better." "Did the person you hurt forgive you?" "Eventually, yes. But the more important thing I learned was that I had to forgive myself. Not forget what happened, not pretend it wasn't serious, but accept that I'm human, that I made an error, and that I could still be a good person and do good things despite that error." "So you're saying I should forgive my dad?" "I'm saying that carrying anger is exhausting, Alex. It takes so much energy to stay mad all the time. That energy could be used for better things. You don't have to forgive your father right away, or maybe ever. But you do have to decide not to let his actions control your life." Over the following months, Alex's behavior improved significantly. He stopped getting into fights. His grades went up. He joined the school's debate team and discovered he had a talent for arguing constructively rather than destructively. When he graduated 2 years later, he came to Patricia's office to thank her. "You helped me see things differently, Miss Long. You showed me that making mistakes, even big ones, doesn't mean your life is over. I'm going to college next year. I never thought I'd say that." "I'm so proud of you, Alex. You did the hard work. I just listened." "You did more than that. You gave me hope." Patricia's work with students became one of the most rewarding aspects of her job. She helped dozens of young people navigate difficulties, make better choices, and believe in their own potential for growth and change. Meanwhile, her friendship with Chief Morrison deepened. He would occasionally consult her on cases that involved document analysis or behavioral profiling. Patricia was always careful to present her findings as educated assessments rather than definitive conclusions, and Chief Morrison appreciated her combination of expertise and humility. One evening, about a year after the Brennan case, Chief Morrison stopped by Patricia's house with a bottle of wine. "I wanted to tell you something," he said as they sat in her living room. "I'm retiring next month." "Really? You're too young to retire." "I'll be 65. I've been police chief here for 23 years. It's time for someone younger to take over. But I wanted to tell you that working with you this past year has been one of the highlights of my career. You brought a level of professionalism and insight that made me better at my job." "That's very kind of you to say, Chief. I mean it. And I hope you'll continue to work with the police department after I'm gone. The new chief will need your expertise just as much as I did." They toasted to his retirement and to the future. Patricia felt grateful for the friendship they had developed and for the opportunity to contribute to her community's safety in meaningful ways. As another school year ended and summer vacation began, Patricia took some time to reflect on the journey she had traveled over the past 16 years. She thought about the person she had been in Washington, D.C., confident and accomplished, dedicated to her work with the FBI. She thought about the devastating mistake that had shattered that identity and sent her fleeing to Lake Bend in shame and despair. And she thought about who she was now, a woman who had faced her past, acknowledged her failures, received forgiveness, and found a new purpose. She was no longer hiding, no longer running, no longer defined solely by her worst moment. She was Patricia Long, Director of School Safety at Lake Bend High School, mentor to troubled students, consultant to the police department, friend to many in the community, and a woman who had learned that redemption was possible through honest self-assessment, humble service, and the courage to use one's gifts despite the fear of failure. In the fall, Lake Bend held its annual Community Appreciation Day, a festival that celebrated residents who had made significant contributions to the town. The event featured food vendors, live music, games for children, and a ceremony where community leaders presented awards to deserving citizens. Patricia had attended the festival every year since moving to Lake Bend, but she had always been just another face in the crowd, enjoying the festivities anonymously. This year was different. Dr. Reynolds had nominated Patricia for the Community Service Award, and the town council had unanimously agreed she should receive it. When he told her about the award, Patricia tried to decline. "I don't need recognition," she said. "I was just doing what needed to be done." "Patricia, this isn't just about catching Thomas Brennan," Dr. Reynolds explained. "It's about everything you've done for this community. It's about the 15 years you spent as a friendly, helpful presence at the school. It's about the student mentoring program you started. It's about your willingness to use your expertise to keep people safe. The town wants to honor you, and I think you should let them." Reluctantly, Patricia agreed. On the day of the festival, the town square was filled with people enjoying the beautiful autumn weather. Children ran through the crowds with balloons and cotton candy. Neighbors chatted and laughed together. The high school band played cheerful music from a stage set up near the gazebo. Patricia wore a simple but elegant dress and felt nervous as the award ceremony approached. She was not comfortable being the center of attention, but she reminded herself that this was about the community expressing its gratitude, not about her seeking praise. When it was time for the ceremony, the mayor, a friendly woman named Susan Clark, stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here today. Community Appreciation Day is one of my favorite events of the year because it gives us a chance to recognize the people who make Lake Bend such a wonderful place to live. Today, I'm especially pleased to present our Community Service Award to someone very special." Mayor Clark went on to describe Patricia's contributions to Lake Bend, starting with her years as the school secretary, who always had a kind word for everyone, continuing through her role in identifying and stopping the person who had threatened the community, and culminating in her current work as director of school safety and student mentor. Patricia Long exemplifies what it means to serve others with dedication, skill, and humility, Mayor Clark said. She used her considerable expertise to protect our town, and she continues to use that expertise to help our young people grow into responsible, thoughtful citizens. Patricia, would you please come up here? Patricia walked to the stage, her heart pounding. The crowd applauded warmly. She saw so many familiar faces. Mrs. Henderson from her street, Mr. Chen and Mrs. Wilson from the school, Chief Morrison, Dr. Reynolds, students she had mentored, including Alex, who was home from college for the weekend. Mayor Clark handed her a plaque and shook her hand. Thank you, Patricia, for everything you do for our community. Patricia took the microphone, her hands trembling slightly. She had not prepared a speech, but she knew she had to say something. Thank you, Mayor Clark, and thank you all for this honor. I have to be honest with you. When I first came to Lake Bend 16 years ago, I was running away from something. I had made a serious mistake in my previous career, a mistake that hurt an innocent person. I came here hoping to disappear, to live quietly where no one knew my history or my failure. The crowd was silent, listening intently. But what I discovered in Lake Bend was something I hadn't expected. A community that welcomed me, that accepted me for who I was, that gave me a chance to contribute in meaningful ways. You didn't know about my past, but even when you learned about it, you didn't reject me. You gave me opportunities to use my skills to help others. Patricia paused, feeling tears in her eyes again. I want you to know that this community saved me. You gave me a reason to believe that I could still do good things despite my mistakes. You taught me that redemption is real, that people can change, and that our worst moments don't have to define us forever. She looked out at the crowd and saw people nodding, some wiping their own eyes. So I want to thank all of you. Thank you for being a place where someone broken can heal. Thank you for being a place where someone who has failed can find a new purpose. And thank you for reminding me every day that kindness, forgiveness, and community matter more than anything else. The applause that followed was thunderous. People stood up, cheering and clapping. Patricia felt overwhelmed by the outpouring of affection and support. After the ceremony, dozens of people came up to thank her personally, to share their own stories of mistakes and second chances, to tell her how much her work had meant to them or their children. Mrs. Henderson hugged her tightly. You've always been special to me, Patricia. Now the whole town knows it too. Alex shook her hand with a big smile. That was an amazing speech, Miss Long. You should be proud of yourself. I'm proud of you, Alex. How's college going? Really well. I'm thinking about majoring in psychology. Maybe I can help people the way you helped me. As the sun set over Lake Bend and the festival continued into the evening with music and dancing, Patricia felt a profound sense of peace. She had traveled a long journey from the devastated FBI analyst who had fled Washington in shame to the honored community member standing here today. She thought about the Buddhist concept of the wounded healer, the idea that those who have suffered and recovered are often the best equipped to help others who are suffering. Her mistake with David Kellerman had wounded her deeply, but that wound had also made her more empathetic, more careful, more humble, and ultimately more effective in helping others. She was not the same person she had been 16 years ago, and that was good. She had learned lessons that only failure could teach. She had developed qualities that only hardship could forge. As the years passed, Patricia continued her work at Lake Bend High School, and her impact on the community deepened. The student mentoring program she had started grew into a comprehensive support system that helped dozens of at-risk students each year. Many of these students, who might otherwise have dropped out or gotten into serious trouble, graduated and went on to college or successful careers. Patricia also began teaching a class at the high school called Critical Thinking and Ethics. In this class, she taught students how to analyze information carefully, how to recognize bias and manipulation, how to think independently while remaining open to other perspectives, and how to make ethical decisions in complex situations. She used real-world examples from her career, including the Kellerman case. She was honest with students about her mistake and what she had learned from it. The students found these discussions fascinating and valuable. What Miss Long teaches us goes way beyond just school stuff, one student wrote in an evaluation. She teaches us how to be better people, how to think about consequences, and how to take responsibility for our actions. Patricia also wrote a handbook on threat assessment for schools, which was published and used by school districts throughout the state. The handbook emphasized the importance of identifying warning signs early, creating supportive environments where troubled students could get help, and maintaining clear channels of communication between schools, families, and law enforcement. Her expertise became widely recognized, and she was occasionally invited to speak at conferences about school safety and student support programs. She always accepted these invitations reluctantly, but she went because she believed the information she could share might help protect other communities. On one such occasion, she spoke at a national conference on school safety in Chicago. After her presentation, a woman in the audience approached her. "Miss Long, I wanted to thank you for your talk. I'm a school counselor in Ohio, and I've been struggling with how to help a particularly troubled student. Your insights about balancing accountability with compassion really resonated with me." "I'm glad it was helpful," Patricia said. "Working with troubled young people is challenging, but it's also incredibly rewarding." "Can I ask you something personal?" the woman said. "In your presentation, you mentioned making a significant mistake earlier in your career. How did you find the courage to keep using your professional skills after that? I would have been terrified of making another mistake." Patricia thought about the question carefully. "I was terrified. I still am sometimes. But I realized that fear of failure can't be an excuse for not trying to help when you have the ability to do so. The key is to approach your work with humility, to be willing to say, 'I don't know,' to verify everything you can, and to never become overconfident in your conclusions. But how do you live with the possibility of being wrong again? By accepting that I'm human and humans make mistakes. By doing my absolute best to be thorough and careful. By being transparent about the limitations of my expertise. And by remembering that refusing to help out of fear is itself a kind of failure." The woman nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you. That's exactly what I needed to hear." Back in Lake Bend, Patricia's relationship with the community continued to evolve. She was no longer just the helpful school secretary, or even just the retired FBI analyst. She had become a respected elder, someone people turned to for wisdom and guidance on all sorts of matters. When the town faced a decision about whether to approve a large commercial development on the outskirts of Lake Bend, the town council asked Patricia to serve on the review committee. When there was a dispute between the school board and teachers' union, both sides asked Patricia to help mediate. When a local teenager was caught shoplifting and the store owner was debating whether to press charges, Patricia was asked to speak with both the teen and the owner to find a constructive resolution. In all of these situations, Patricia brought the same qualities: careful analysis, empathy for all parties, a focus on finding solutions rather than assigning blame, and a belief in people's capacity for growth and change. She also maintained her friendship with David Kellerman. They exchanged emails regularly and met for lunch whenever she visited the city or he was traveling near Pennsylvania. Kellerman had indeed created a successful nonprofit organization that helped exonerated prisoners, and Patricia sometimes consulted with the organization on cases where document analysis might help prove someone's innocence. "You've turned your mistake into something meaningful," Kellerman told her during one of their meetings. "You've helped so many people because of what you learned from our case." "I don't think I would have chosen that path if I could have avoided it," Patricia admitted. "But yes, I've tried to make something positive come from something terrible." "That's all any of us can do," Kellerman said. "Take the hand we're dealt and play it the best we can." As Patricia entered her mid-70s, she began to think about retirement. She had been working for more than 50 years, first with the FBI and then at Lake Bend High School. She had earned the right to rest. But when she mentioned the possibility to Dr. Reynolds, who was still the principal, he looked alarmed. "Patricia, you can't retire. You're an institution here. Students come to Lake Bend High specifically because they know they'll have access to your mentoring program. Teachers rely on your expertise and judgment. The whole community depends on you." "Dr. Reynolds, I'm 74 years old. I'm tired. I want to spend my remaining years reading, gardening, maybe traveling a bit." "I understand. I really do. But could you at least consider staying part-time? Maybe 3 days a week instead of 5? You could focus on the mentoring program and let someone else handle the administrative aspects of the safety director position." Patricia thought about it. The truth was, she loved her work. She loved the students, the sense of purpose, the feeling that she was making a difference. Complete retirement might actually leave her feeling empty and restless. "3 days a week," she said, "and I get to choose which 3 days." Dr. Reynolds laughed. "Deal." So Patricia transitioned to part-time work, which gave her more time for other interests, but kept her connected to the school community she had come to love. She used her free time to write a memoir about her career, her mistake, and her journey toward redemption. The memoir, titled Second Chances, A Life of Service, Failure, and Renewal, was published when she was 76 and became unexpectedly popular. Readers connected with her honest account of professional failure and personal growth. Many people wrote to her sharing their own stories of mistakes and redemption. Some were professionals who had made errors in their work. Others were people who had hurt loved ones or made poor choices and were trying to find ways to move forward. Patricia answered every letter personally, offering encouragement and wisdom drawn from her own experience. One letter particularly moved her. It was from a young forensic scientist who had misidentified evidence in a case and was now questioning whether she should continue in her field. Patricia wrote back, "Dear Sarah, I understand your pain and doubt. Making a mistake in work that affects people's lives is devastating. But please consider this. Your mistake has made you more careful, more humble, and more aware of the weight of your responsibilities. These qualities will make you a better scientist, not a worse one. If you truly love your work and believe in its importance, don't let fear drive you away from it. Instead, let your mistake make you more committed to excellence and more compassionate toward others who struggle. The world needs conscientious, thoughtful forensic scientists. It needs people like you." Years later, Sarah would write back to tell Patricia that she had continued in forensic science, had become a leader in her field, and had developed new quality control procedures that had been adopted nationwide to prevent the kind of error she had made. Patricia Long lived to the age of 85, remaining active and engaged with the Lake Bend community until her final year. She continued her part-time work at the school until she was 80, mentored students until she was 82, and served on various community boards and committees until her health no longer permitted. When she passed away peacefully in her sleep one spring morning, the entire town mourned. Lake Bend High School closed for a day so that students and staff could attend her memorial service. The church was filled to capacity, with people standing in the back and along the sides. Speaker after speaker rose to share stories about Patricia. Dr. Reynolds, now retired himself, talked about how she had protected the school from the threatening letter campaign and had transformed school safety practices. Chief Morrison's successor talked about how Patricia had helped solve numerous cases over the years with her analytical expertise. Former students, now adults with families of their own, talked about how Patricia's mentoring had changed the course of their lives. But perhaps the most moving tribute came from Alex, the angry teenager Patricia had mentored more than 20 years ago. He was now a successful psychologist working with at-risk youth. "When I was 16 years old, I was angry at the world," Alex said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was on a path that would have led to prison or worse. Miss Long saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. She didn't judge me or lecture me. She told me her own story of failure and redemption. She showed me that making mistakes doesn't mean you're a bad person, and that you can choose to learn and grow from your experiences." He paused, looking at Patricia's photo displayed near the altar. "Miss Long taught me that the measure of a person isn't whether they fail. Everyone fails. But what they do after they fail. She made a serious mistake in her career, and she spent the rest of her life trying to help others so that they wouldn't have to experience what she and others had experienced. She turned her greatest regret into her greatest contribution." Alex wiped his eyes. "I became a psychologist because of her. I work with troubled kids because she showed me how much difference one caring, thoughtful adult can make in a young person's life. Everything good I do in my work, I do because of what she taught me. Miss Long, wherever you are, thank you. Thank you for not giving up on yourself, because if you had, you wouldn't have been there to keep me from giving up on myself." After the service, the town council announced that they would be naming the Lake Bend High School Library the Patricia Long Learning Center in her honor. They also established the Patricia Long Memorial Scholarship, which would provide financial assistance to students who had overcome significant personal challenges and were pursuing higher education. In the months following Patricia's death, dozens of letters arrived at the school from former students, colleagues, and community members sharing their memories of her. The letters were compiled into a book that was placed in the newly named Patricia Long Learning Center. One letter, from a woman who had graduated from Lake Bend High 30 years earlier, captured the essence of Patricia's impact. "I never knew Miss Long during her FBI career. I never knew about the case that caused her to leave that life behind. I only knew her as the kind secretary who always remembered my name, who asked about my day, who helped me print my college applications when our printer at home broke. Years later, when I learned about her remarkable background and the journey she had traveled, I was amazed. But I was not surprised that she had become such an important part of our community. Greatness shows itself in small acts of kindness as much as in dramatic moments of heroism. Miss Long was great because she cared about people. She used her gifts to help others, and she never let her past mistakes stop her from making a positive difference in the world. We should all aspire to live with such grace and purpose." Patricia's house on Maple Street was eventually sold, but before it was, the town held an estate sale where community members could purchase items to remember her by. Her collection of mystery novels went to the library. Her gardening tools went to the community garden committee. Her quilt collection was distributed among the members of the quilting circle, who each treasured having a piece of something Patricia had created. And her old FBI credentials and documents, which she had kept in a box in her attic, were donated to a museum dedicated to the history of forensic science, where they would help educate future generations about the evolution of document analysis and the human dimensions of forensic work. David Kellerman attended Patricia's memorial service, though he sat quietly in the back and did not speak. After the service, he left a note with Dr. Reynolds. "Patricia Long was the person who made the mistake that destroyed my life. she was also the person who taught me about the possibility of forgiveness and redemption. Her courage in facing what she had done, in learning from it, and in dedicating herself to helping others has been an inspiration to me in my own work. The world is poorer without her, but richer for having had her in it. Please know that I considered her a friend, and I will miss her. Years after Patricia's death, her memoir continued to be read and discussed in book clubs, college ethics classes, and professional training programs. It became a standard text in forensic science education, used to teach students about the importance of humility, thoroughness, and awareness of the profound impact their work could have on people's lives. And in Lake Bend, Patricia Long was remembered not primarily as the FBI analyst who made a mistake, nor even as the expert who caught Thomas Brennan, but as the quiet guardian who watched over the community, who helped young people find their way, who turned her own pain into a gift of compassion and wisdom for others. The inscription on her gravestone in the Lake Bend Cemetery, chosen by the town council in consultation with those who knew her best, read simply, Patricia Long, 1958 to 2043. Servant, teacher, friend. She taught us that our mistakes do not define us. Our response to them does. And every year on the anniversary of her death, students from Lake Bend High School visited her grave and left flowers, along with notes telling her about their lives, their struggles, their triumphs, and their gratitude for the example she had set and the legacy she had left behind. Patricia Long had come to Lake Bend to hide from her past, but in hiding, she had found herself. In service, she had found redemption. And in her willingness to use her gifts despite her fears, she had become exactly what Lake Bend needed, a quiet guardian who protected not just physical safety, but also the belief that people could change, that communities could heal, and that second chances were real. Her story became part of Lake Bend's story, woven into the fabric of the town's identity, a reminder that greatness is not the absence of failure, but the courage to rise after falling, to help after being hurt, and to believe in the possibility of renewal even in the darkest moments. And that, perhaps, was Patricia Long's greatest gift to the community she had come to call home. The knowledge that none of us are defined by our worst moments, that all of us have the capacity to contribute meaningfully to the lives of others, and that redemption is always possible for those who are willing to do the hard work of self-examination, growth, and service. The sun continues to rise over Maple Street in Lake Bend, casting its warm light on the yellow house where Patricia once lived. Children walk to school past her former home, not knowing the history, not knowing the woman who once tended those roses and fed those birds. But they benefit from her legacy anyway, from the safety protocols she established, from the culture of compassion and second chances she helped create, from the example of integrity and service she embodied. Patricia Long may have left this world, but her impact remains, rippling outward in ways both seen and unseen. A quiet testament to the power of redemption, the importance of using our gifts in service to others, and the enduring truth that our stories are never just about our failures, but about what we choose to do next. And in that choice, in that decision to rise again, to serve again, to believe again in the possibility of making a positive difference despite our imperfections, in that choice lies the true measure of a life well lived. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what inspired you the most. And where in the world are you watching from? Let us know below.